let's play this clip because the people have to understand the context in which, like the Democrats operate in. And this is what's sort of fascinating about what we've seen so far is there is less of this. I thought there was going to be a rush back to this, but it's amazing that we are less than 3 weeks out from less than 4 weeks out from a literal attack on the Capitol by Trump's supporters, where the Republican Party is now refusing to impeach Trump over this. And we've seen them do a 180 on this, at least Mitch McConnell, right? Mitch McConnell was saying secretly, I think this is important that we impeach Trump, blah, blah, blah. And yet, the mainstream media, ostensibly the most, liberal network, MSNBC, still retains this mythical vision of the Republican Party. It's never their fault. They have no agency. These lawmakers have no agency whatsoever. And here's Chuck Todd talking to Garrett Haake.
Here's what I'm trying to figure out. I assume if there were a secret ballot, there'd be a lot of House Republicans that say, "Hey, this is a bridge too far."
Pause it for 1 second. I'm sorry. He is talking about the idea of Marjorie Taylor Greene getting censured or kicked out of Congress because she's literally called within the past, 48 months for the assassination, 24 months of the assassination of Nancy Pelosi, which really, I don't know if there's a law against that, but that seems to be like a bad work environment.
At the very least, it's an HR concern.
Indeed. Right. She apparently also accosted Cori Bush. Cori Bush had to have her office moved because they were too close proximity.
Comedians were visited by the FBI for saying a lot less than that.
Indeed. And so, this is somebody who should be kicked out. Instead, the caucus is meeting to see if they're going to get rid of Lynn Cheney from her leadership role. And I should be clear, I would expel Lynn Cheney just based upon her lineage if it was up to me. But this is where the center of the
You mean her lineage?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you keep saying Lynn. Yeah.
Oh, Liz Cheney. Sorry.
It's fine.
But this is where the party is. And so Chuck Todd is saying, I'm assuming they don't really want to do this and support her. And here's Garrett Haake, who does the reporting. So go to the beginning of this.
Here's what I'm trying to figure out. I assume if there were a secret ballot, there'd be a lot of House Republicans that say, "Hey, this is a bridge too far." Are there more than just a handful speaking up here, or is this just not going to happen?
I'm not sure that's a safe assumption, Chuck. I think this is kind of the reality that we're operating in under here. If there's no leadership condemnation here, there's no groundswell, there's not even quiet, off the record leaking. It's not like I know things but don't have members who are willing to go on the record complaining about it to tell you about it. This is part and parcel of a Republican Party, particularly in the House, that is a little bit unsure of their own base, of their own voters, and of the things that they believe and are pushing them. And I think that's part of the unsteadiness to condemn someone like Greene, is it's not clear, I think, to many of these elected representatives how many of their own constituents believe similar things to what she does.
But it's not just that, too. It's also, I've got some very bad news for Chuck Todd and for any commentator who wants to believe that the Republican Party, these elected leaders, have no agency and they are just being pulled around by their constituents. I'm sure there's some of it. I'm sure that's part of it. But I got news for you. The lunatics have taken over the asylum. And I think that it's just a matter of time before it's completely like this in the Senate. But it is virtually completely like this in the House. Come on.
Yeah. And of course they have agency, like you're saying, Sam, because part of why their constituents believe this and they're holding, are a lot in line with what Marjorie Taylor Greene believes, is because of a deliberate inaction by the Republican Party to squash this in any real way, because they thought it benefited them. And now they're doing the exact same thing behind closed doors, whispering maybe that they don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene, but that there's no indication that they'll act on. But I mean, that's what he's saying. Right.
That's what he's hoping. He's projecting this on them. I mean, this is the amazing thing. Like, look, 75% of Republican voters believe that Donald Trump, in one way or another, actually won the election. Why would anyone assume that Republican elected leaders are any different from their constituents? Like, this whole notion that he has in his head, like they believe something different, but they've got to respond to their people, as opposed to the much more obvious assumption.
I mean, there have been reports that they're talking behind the scenes, like, and saying, oh, I don't think he actually won the election, which I don't know what's worse though, Sam. I don't know what's worse.
We hear from the 25%. What my argument is that what Garrett Haake, who's doing the reporting, is saying, like, to be honest with you, no, I don't think they got a problem with this. Why would the assumption be that these Republican lawmakers represent anything different than what the Republican voter does? I'm not, like, they're not so savvy that they're seeing, Congress people, they are true believers. A lot of these people are true believers. And just because you have people like Boebert in there who wants to pack, gun and Cawthorn, what's his name, want to go in there, just because they're completely, in bat crap crazy, doesn't mean that the rest of them aren't just like crazy. Just because they are willing to go out there and market themselves that way doesn't mean that these people don't believe it either. I mean,
yeah, I think there's like this cognitive dissonance by the media that you're hitting on here, right? Where they can't fathom that the suit and tie congressperson is just behind that, behind their, coiffed veneer is that Republican voter that they talk about, that they see in the polling, that they see in terms of just the crazy things that they believe, not committed to that aren't tied to reality. And it's the same cognitive dissonance that allow them to separate Donald Trump from the Republican Party. So there is this lauding of the esteemed Republican senator, the esteemed Republican congressperson that no longer exists anymore. And they are so slow on the uptake here. They are unable to reconcile those views, and it causes the coverage. I mean, I'm not saying there, but in many instances to suffer.
It's so cloying. It's so desperate to be like, can't we just pretend that the Republican Party are normal people? They're not. I'm sorry. They're not. And even if we get another clip, I want you to cue up clip number 5. Even if it's the case that the Republican Party, they're secretly normal, sane people who don't subscribe to the notion that lawmakers on the other side of the aisle should be assassinated. Even if they don't subscribe to those ideas, even if they don't subscribe to the QAnon beliefs or the idea that Donald Trump actually won the presidency, they are so craven and so incapable of separating from their constituents that it doesn't even matter. Like, bringing it up is irrelevant. Here is Asa Hutchinson. And I remember this dude when he was in Congress, taking the moral high ground about Bill Clinton having an affair. Here he is with Martha Raddatz. I want you to listen very carefully to what he says, how he characterizes Marjorie Taylor Greene's call for an assassination against Nancy Pelosi. Now, look, I would love Nancy Pelosi not to be the leader of the Democrats in the House. But I mean, put aside whatever your feelings are, you make this any generic politician. The idea that you would have a politician calling for the assassination of another politician, and you have evidence 3 weeks ago of where that type of talk leads, and you're running for, your governor. And I think he's term limited out. He's just afraid of I don't know what. Listen to this.
more question about a member of Congress, a new Republican member of Congress, Trump loyalist Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's long embraced conspiracy theories like QAnon, voiced support for executing Nancy Pelosi. Is she fit to serve, and should she be on the Education Committee?
Well, that's, first of all, the people of her district elected her, and that should mean a lot. They elected her, and she's going to run for re-election, and she'll be accountable for what she said and her actions. And then,
given her history, is she really fit to serve?
I'm not going to answer that question as to whether she's fit to serve because she believes in something that everybody else does not accept. I reject that, but she's going to stand for re-election. I don't think we ought to punish people from a disciplinary standpoint, a party standpoint, because they think something a little bit different.
What they think that's different is that Nancy Pelosi should be assassinated and that there's a cabal of pedophiles in the government that need to be rooted out.
No, you say different. It's a little different.
Sorry,
it's
my bad.
A little different. Can you imagine? Can you play that last part about that last part of that sentence again? I mean, that's absolutely nuts.
That everybody else does not accept. I reject that, but she's going to stand for re-election. I don't think we ought to punish people from a disciplinary standpoint, a party standpoint, because they think something a little bit different.
The obvious follow-up would be, was it wrong to censure Steve King then?
Yeah, or what was his view on the censuring of Ilhan Omar, by the way, which the Democrats gleefully threw her to the wolves there. And now we're seeing the little drip about Marjorie Taylor Greene. At least Pelosi did come out against her, but she almost came out more quickly against censoring Ilhan Omar for manufactured, made up anti-Semitic
without
comments,
a doubt,
which wasn't true. Yeah.
What would be a lot bit different? You know, some people say, should we assassinate Nancy Pelosi? Some people say, should we just campaign against her? It's a little different. I mean, the idea that these people are any way reachable. At what point is the American body politic going to understand the fever is not going to break? It is not going to break. We need to provide, I don't know what it's called, antibiotics, or we need to sort of maybe lop off an arm so that the infection doesn't spread. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but the fever is not breaking. It is not going to break.
Well, you know how you fix it is you beat them. You beat them, and then you make this kind of politics untenable, and then there's a regrouping. Just like, the way the Democrats, crawled back into their cave and tried to regroup during the Reagan years. And also, it was a change in politics that we obviously don't agree with in terms of the fact that they became more conservative, and Bill Clinton was the figurehead for that kind of politics. But they regrouped because Reagan won his second election in a massive landslide, and they were like, no, our kind of politics is untenable at this point. The Democrats need to do that to the Republicans. Do that. Destroy them. And then they change.
I mean, in many respects, when Barack Obama said, I cannot remember the exact quote, but he was interviewed and he said Ronald Reagan he thought was a monumental president in that way. There was a lot of us who were like, he's going to do to the Republicans what Reagan did to the Democrats. And nope, he did not.
Well, he had a killer instinct on the campaign trail when his name was on the ballot. But when it came to other Democrats, I'm going to take a back seat. So we had a huge missed opportunity there, but we have another bite at the apple, as you would say, Sam, here. Even though Biden's a much less charismatic figure, we are seeing some positive signs that potentially they could take a more aggressive approach to the Republicans because, God help us if they don't.